This video is on why we lie. Why do we lie? Well, mostly it comes down to embarrassment and fear. When it all comes down to it, embarrassment is part of that. We get embarrassed because we're afraid. We're afraid of judgment. We're afraid of what other people might think. Now, a lot of people, they tell little white lies, believing they're protecting others. However, when those little white lies affect the decisions of others, well, those little white lies are not little white lies any longer. They're destructive. They're manipulative. I have used lies to manipulate in very specific circumstances. However, you got to take a look at my personality. I don't get embarrassed. I'll tell you anything about me that you want to know. Anything. Anything I have ever done, right or wrong, you ask me, I'll tell you. If you're wrong, I'm going to tell you. Now, when I lied and said that I would kill the President of the United States, there was an intent and purpose in that. That intent and purpose was to manipulate the Secret Service and the FBI into looking at a very complicated situation. A situation where I was victimized illegally across multiple jurisdictions. Now, my fear of evidence being lost and stolen was justified. There are belongings of mine that I require Officer Brian Valenzuela to return to me. In specific, one of those items is a picture of Miss Natalie. Another of those items is a picture of Charlie that I drew. Another of those items is a poem that I wrote about Natalie. Sentiments. A lot of people have sentiments. My sentiments towards Miss Natalie are that she was a wonderful person, and I would like to share the positive about her. Have I lied about Miss Natalie? Nope. Have I used harsh words? Abso-fucking-lutely. In order to create change. Well, here's something I'm going to tell you about Miss Natalie. She was wonderful. I will not let her death go unchallenged. There is a lesson to be learned. Why did she lie? Why was she afraid to tell the truth? I believe in doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Lying is not a part of that. Manipulation is not a part of that. Being an asshole, well, there's an intent and purpose in that as well. I don't want to be an asshole. I just want to be good to people. That castle idea that I have, that's because there's a lot of people who are not spoiled like Amanda and Lana Engeline. When I say spoiled, I do mean spoiled. Like a rotten egg, they are spoiled. Many of you believe that you did things all by yourself. Meanwhile, you have had family in your corner every step of the way. Does your family listen to you, or do they tell you how to think and how to feel? Do they lie and steal and manipulate? Are they looking out for your best interests? Or are they looking out for theirs? Were Natalie's family decent people, they would be looking out for the best interests of all of us. And that means going after the police for the bullshit that they pulled. That means going after Ted for the bullshit that he pulled. There are things that you don't do to another human being. There are things that are not acceptable. You do not rape your own daughter. That is not acceptable. Now, before we get any further into the lying kick, we're going to stick to something very important here. We're going to go to something called statistics. Now, statistics are dependent upon what information you gather. How can you possibly gather all of the information? And how can you possibly know whether or not all of that information is correct or correctly gathered? 90% of statistics are made up on the spot. Mine are mathematically calculated. See, I don't just start spouting off at the lip numbers. I take a look at these numbers, and some of these numbers are different depending on where you look. Whether or not you're looking at a website built by the Police Officers Union, or statistics made by the jail, or statistics made by the homeless. How are we to know how many of those non-homeless people in the jails that they actually wrote down an address for, their last address? Or, in my case in Larimer County, well, the officer, when I went in to have my fingerprints taken, wrote down that I lived in Larimer County. I didn't. That guy was a lying son of a bitch. Yes, I just insulted his mother. It's not the insults that are the issue. It's the frequency with which you guys allow these things to happen. When I say you guys, I'm not trying to be sexist. I'm talking about both men and women when I say the word guys. Now, I'm going to tell you something. During Roman times, everybody used the same bathroom. Community bathrooms. Can you imagine that? Transgender bathrooms. Co-ed bathrooms. Of course, that has a lot more to do with their clothing than anything else. See, you could sit 2 feet from your neighbor in those bathrooms because you were wearing a toga. You don't have to pull it all the way up. It goes all the way down to your knees or further. A toga will go all the way down to your ankles. A tunic goes to your knees. Now, with both of those garments, you pull them up rather than down. You're not exposing yourself to your neighbor. Not only that, but you're holding the stink in. Basically, you're creating a tent around the hole that you're using the bathroom in. Now, we got a lot of shit going on where we think that we are so much better and so much greater than the Romans. They lived 2,000 years ago. They didn't have electricity. We are so much better than them. Yet, their buildings were built efficiently so that they didn't need electricity. Imagine that. We have a bad habit of lying to ourselves because we're embarrassed. We want it to be somebody else's fault. Always. We want the rules to be different for others than we have for ourselves. Always. My rules are different from yours. I do not hold most of you to my rules. However, I do change myself and adapt based on the situation. When your rules were not the same for you as they were for me, I started doing the things that you guys do that you find so offensive. You are doing these things and you find them offensive. Yet it's okay for you and it's not okay for others. When it got to the point where asking nicely for people to stop did not work, well, I started treating people the way they treated me. Miss Natalie was wonderful, but she was embarrassed. She was afraid to be honest. Her sister as well. She's afraid of the consequences. Unfortunately, right now the difference between us making this world a better place and Natalie going down in history as a junkie whore, well, the fact is, Natalie was not a junkie whore. She was a good person who was afraid of opinions. Opinions of her family who should have loved her properly. Sex is not love, Ted. You need to admit what you did to your daughter. Alicia, you need to come forward. Maddie Boa, you need to come forward. I don't expect you to, though, because I understand your fears. All of these people who you lied to, all of these people who you were dishonest with, if you're honest now, these people will realize what you did to my life and to Natalie's life through your dishonesty. And you're afraid of the consequences of that. You're afraid you'll lose friends. You're afraid that that love that you get in real life will be taken away. That sympathy. That free shit that you got for lying. Natalie Bollinger was wonderful. And her legacy deserves to be wonderful. And by her example, and the example of her life, we can change the world. But are you willing to do that? Or are you a coward? Like Ted? Like Troy?